So on to our first speaker. So Naomi Sesay is our first speaker today. She began her 20-year TV and media career working on MTV News as a producer, director, and as a presenter. Naomi's become a powerful advocate with her most recent roles, including the on-screen diversity executive and interim head of diversity and inclusion at Channel 4 and head of innovation and diversity for Media Trust. So welcome, Naomi.
Thank you so very much, Hugo. And thank you for Speakers Corner for inviting me to speak at this showcase. So today I want to talk about something that is not usually spoken about in the world of diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. But it may be the most single important aspect to making real meaningful change in our workspace and cultural environments. Now, we all understand that the world is rapidly changing, right? Finance is changing, social norms are changing, ideas are getting bigger and more complex, movements are being created, and technology is emerging faster than society's capability to keep up. It's no wonder that we're experiencing a mental health surge, and it's obvious something has to give before we actually unravel. And yet, we're still here. We're still trying to figure out how to create inclusive cultures, still trying to figure out how we can put together environments and spaces where we all can say we belong. And despite all our first world advances, we find ourselves struggling to tackle and overcome 600 years of untruths, a gaslighting event that warped our perception of ourselves and changed the trajectory of who we could have actually become. Now in the 21st century, as we sense our unraveling, we frantically look for our answers by recruiting more diversity in hopes that it would lead to inclusion, without realizing that we're still using the same mindset and the same vernacular in the same vein in which the original problem was created in the first place. So my question is this: why? Why are we still here at this junction? Why are we still battling with racism, bias, prejudice, and discrimination? Why has it taken so long as intelligent human beings to even venture into a dialogue, recognizing that an era so long ago has stunted human growth for centuries and has issued a disservice to the advancement of humankind? There is a glitch. There is a glitch in our psyche that prevents us from fast forwarding into new ways of thinking and new innovations, which incidentally could have solved our wicked problems such as poverty, climate change, and inequities. That glitch is caused by pieces of information missing on how we communicate and consume information. You see, we are far more powerful than what we have been programmed to believe, cognitively speaking, that is. But the tools to tap into that cognitive resource are rarely taught in our school curriculums, nor in our universities, and definitely not in the workplace. So we grow up a little bit lopsided, with lopsided ideas. Back in 2004, I left Big Brother triumphant. No, I didn't win the 70K, and I wasn't a contestant. In fact, I was the first producer-director in the UK who produced the very first show. But in 2004, I left television altogether because I had a sense that I would never achieve my potential in the TV world. I somehow felt that I didn't quite belong. Of course, it wasn't explicitly expressed, but there was always this feeling that I had to work twice as hard to get half as much. And I couldn't put my finger on what exactly made me feel that way. Many people from many walks of life have actually felt this phenomenon. I'm sure you have too. And I've now come to the understanding that affinity bias was at play, but how was it perceived if you didn't know what it actually was? So I went into property, and by 2008, I was one of the very few successful Black female property investors and trainers. And my aim was to achieve financial independence because I felt my time was my greatest asset. My thinking was, if I had my time back, I could do amazing things under my own volition. And that intersectional representation of being an African female in a very white, male-dominated world should have given me the heebie-jeebies. I should have had a hard time rising to the top. I should have experienced the box. because in reality, the odds were against me. If I had believed what society programs us to believe, that I am a certain thing, I would have most certainly have failed. You see, social cognitive programming forces us to look through a specific lens. It tells us where we should place ourselves in society. The programming is riddled in our media, in our books, in our fairy tales, in Disney films, in advertising, in newspapers, and even in our language. It told me that there was no Prince Charming for Black girls, that Black girls grew up to be aggressive women, and that we would always be over-sexualized and eroticized. Black girls weren't wealthy property investors. Black girls weren't senior scientists in Harvard or city developers. But it's not only Black girls who have a box, it's women in general, Black and brown men, it's the LGBTQ plus community, those deemed as disabled, and all the glorious intersectionality within. Society tells you where to place yourself. Each of us has something cemented in our brain that we learned at a very young age. Have a think for a moment. What is something that has always been in your head, even if you have no use for it whatsoever right now? I bet many of you remember saying supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, if you were in my generation. I also remember being a brownie guide. I promise that I will do my best and do my duty to God to serve the Queen, and I even put my hand up as a behavior cue, because that's what I learned. So it's worth thinking about how some of the information we acquire as children impacts us through our lives and the implications this has upon entering the workforce. You see, social cognitive programming is so powerful that young children at the age of 4 and even 5 have already picked up social cues and act accordingly. To illustrate this, you can go and watch the Dole test on YouTube this evening, just to actually understand what cognitive programming does to young children. So consider the multitude of subtle biased views that rain upon us every single day, and we're not even aware of it. And here's the rub. How do you become aware of something you're not aware of? You see, what many of us don't know is that we have more than 400 billion bits of information riding on our personal biofield. It's ours. You're sitting on it right now. You walk around with it every single day. In fact, it affects the way you feel, the way you think, and ultimately the way you behave. But we're only aware of 2,000 bits of information. That's a sliver of reality. Your information is riddled with cognitive programming from your family, your peer group, your environment, and society as a whole. And the moment you get into the workplace, you're pretty much set to interact with people who are like you and people who are not like you. And you will know how you have been programmed by how you emotionally respond to situations that you're not familiar with. Your programming is your default. And so, because it's your default, you're so used to your own modality of behavior and you become comfortable. And because we like comfort, we stay there. And that's how the status quo stays intact and never moves, or very incrementally small. You see, race, cultural, and emotional fluency are tricky subjects to navigate because it brings up uncomfortable emotions within our cognitive programming, and we don't like feeling uncomfortable. But we need to understand that we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable if we're going to move the dial. We shy away from challenging someone's poor behavior in fear of offending the offender. We protect our dignity when we unintentionally issue microaggressions, professing it wasn't our intention to offend, whilst ignoring the negative impact we have made on the recipient. We allow poor behavior to pass because we don't have the adequate words or eloquent words to challenge it. And we call ourselves not racist, but have no clue that being anti-racist trumps being not racist any day, because it neurologically changes behavior and thus our programming. You see, no one has ever reached the top of their field by being comfortable. Change comes when you feel uncomfortable. No one ever innovates without acquiring different information, and that can feel uncomfortable. No one ever becomes their true selves without expanding their hearts and minds to absorb different perspectives and dynamic emotional spectrums. You see, in order for us to evolve in any situation, we, each and every one of us, need to think deeply and take control of the billions of bits of information we walk around with every day. That's when moments of clarity occur. That's when we shift our neurology and change our habits. You see, those 400 billion bits of information that exudes from your body is palpable and visceral. It can be felt and perceived by others. You can walk into an organization and instantly feel the culture. That feeling bubbles up into consciousness, forcing you to create a meaning. And that's when you can put your finger on that which you couldn't articulate. That is how we create change. By being hyper aware of the information you possess, your behavior cues, your language, your automatic thought patterns, and your emotions, you start to change the way you behave. By seeking new ways to express what you really mean, that may mean changing your language and the lens through which you look through. By getting clear on who you really want to be and how you want to represent. And by seeking new experiences that pushes your boundaries. And by understanding that nothing in life has any meaning but the meaning you give it. Thank you very much.
Naomi, thank you so much for that.